I didn't think we were going to be quite this quick in the day, in the proceedings of everything for Gamers Without Borders. However, we've already qualified one player through to Gamers 8. Now moving on, we have another Korean player to move on into that tournament over in Riyadh as well. Joining me to talk about
Ben is doing
stuff.
quadruple analyst.
It's Cats and Roddy. Does Cats realize he's on is the question.
I am not sure, Papi. You know that we are live cats.
What?
We are live. Clarence just did a lovely intro. I'll let you go ahead and set up the stream, and I'll just have a little chitty chat with James. To be honest, James, I wasn't quite ready to go live either, because what on earth did I just witness?
Right. I mean, ridiculous. I mean, let's talk about it here for a moment, Roddy, because I'm bamboozled. I'm going to be honest with you. I did think it was going to be a longer series than that. Never mind 3-0 for Solar. But what did you make of Maru overall?
That's really hard. I feel like this is one of these moments where we honestly just need to have a little chitty chat with Maru to understand what completely happened there. Yeah. I do think when I see series like this, I think it's always important to keep in mind that these guys are human and we can't just expect them to play their A game each and every single game. Just because we are ready and we sit down to cast them, that doesn't mean that Maru can always just peak whenever we expect him to peak. Maybe he just had an awful day. Maybe he felt slow. Sometimes we all have an off day and he's like, you know what? I don't want to play ByuN today because I don't have it. I'm just going to try to have some fun with Mac, and Solar was having none of it. Like, that's honestly pretty much everything I got for you, mate.
Fair. I wonder if Katz has got something for me. Can he hear me this time or no?
I can hear you. This time I can hear you for sure. No, I don't really have anything. I mean, that was insane, right? Like just going Banshees and them not working and then him trying again. And really, it doesn't feel like it's his forte. It's not like he is the underdog. It's not like Solar has had his number or anything like that. I was checking the match history, and no, like Solar took like 2 out of the last 6 or 7 series against Maru. So really, he could have done anything else. But yeah, this time around, he decided not to for whatever reasons. And that was the result.
There you go. And now we guarantee have a Maru versus Hero lower bracket match, which is going to be exciting, I'm sure. But let's move on to the match coming up here, guys. TVT, and it will be ByuN going up against GuMiho. Cats, I'm going to give you the floor to start things off here between these two. Excited to see how this TVT is going to go down.
Yeah, for sure. TVT with ByuN is always super exciting because a lot of TVT players will kind of sit back and absorb. ByuN is always on the offense, it feels like. But GuMiho is also no slouch, especially when it comes to like freaky builds and coming up with his own strategies. He is one of the very best in the world. Both players looking pretty good in TVT. ByuN going something like 14-1 in his last 15 series. Granted, both of them do play against lesser opponents, right, in online cups and stuff like that. But there's a couple of victories against Cure, against Special, and so on and so forth, and we've seen what he can do against the likes of Maru as well, so should be a great series, I think.
I would hope so, as we take a look at the maps coming in here. But beyond that, Roddy, what are you thinking coming in? Because GuMiho looked good yesterday. I'm hoping that GuMiho can bring even more oomph today. I mean, currently, as we said, teamless and, you know, maybe looking for a new team. But being able to get more wins on his resume here, moving through to Gamers 8, would be a nice boost in that direction.
Absolutely. GuMiho's been looking good for a while, man. Like, we often look at Gumi as a guy like, yeah, you peaked a long time ago when you had a couple of great results over in Korea and you were beating up on foreigners for a while. But even against the best Koreans throughout 2023, he's been holding his own. He gets a lot of big wins on the board. And it's almost not a surprise anymore if he beats a guy like Hero, because we have to look at his IM Katowice. He made round of 12, but it wasn't like bumping and bruising round of 12. No, he was smacking nerds around in that group stage, and we were all very impressed by him back then. But I am just excited to see ByuN. I think when it comes to TVT, you have a lot of different styles that players like to bring out. And ByuN plays what we almost universally agree upon is not necessarily the best TVT style, but it's very action-packed, and he just makes the difference with his great micro and his great multitasking. And that's why I think, personally, it's always a treat to watch ByuN go at it in TVT.
All right, well, let's get into it. I'm hearing that the players are already ready here for this best of 5. Gentlemen, thank you. Cats, you can go back to doing whatever you were doing. And we are going to get to our commentators to bring us this Terran versus Terran. The winner moves on to Gamers 8.
All right, let's hop into this Terran versus Terran. I'm Fear Dragon, joined here by Zombie Grub, and this is going to be yet another one of those qualifying matches. Zombie Grub, I am not gonna lie. I actually looked at this particular series coming up and everything, and it was something I could see having happened in the bracket, but it wasn't actually what I expected to be like the surefire TVT that was gonna happen as a qualifying match. I don't know about you.
Definitely agree with that. No, I agree with that. I guess if you did, because I think there was a little bit of ego, I guess, with the commentators, figuring what we that we'd know how some of these things would go down. And I think ByuN Ragnarok would have gone either way. But Hero GuMiho absolutely was supposed to be Hero favored. Again, insane win streak from Hero 9-0 in series. So GuMiho certainly already defeating one Nemesis, one very good player, but in the form of Protoss. Now has to face another very good player in the form of Terran. And here we go, spawning on top of that guy in the top right of Ancient Cistern. It is ByuN for Shopify Rebellion.
And down here on the bottom left-hand side of the map, we have our blue Terran player. He is none other than GuMiGod himself, GuMiho.
Oh yeah. GuMiGod, the Tal Terran. I do believe still uses a Tal as well.
Ooh. All right, getting spicy to start things off. Got our first barracks proxy there for GuMiho. I was actually about to say that I really like the clash of these two players, because when I think of them, when I think of ByuN, yeah, he could throw out some nice strategies and everything here and there, but I really do think of him as just mechanically gifted in all the things that he does. And oh man, we're getting a 2 Rex there from ByuN, so I'll let you talk about this in a second. But to finish the thought, then I think of GuMiho, it's like, I think of him for his strategy, not necessarily his mechanics. It's like they're opposite ends of Terrans in my mind.
Well, yeah, no, I can definitely see that. I do think that ByuN has carved out that name for himself. That is the aggressive, like 8 racks bio player, which we'll definitely talk about if this game actually goes past the 5-minute mark. And then what GuMiho is likely to do as well. But we really got to talk about what's happening in this early game. GuMiho is proxy raxing. Usually if you go for 1 rax, it could be a sign that you're going to go for Marauder. Well, no, he's going just for a Reaper. ByuN is going for a 2 racks at home, which is a little less lethal, but nonetheless, 2 Reapers does beat 1 Fear Dragon. I did the math for you. And if GuMiho doesn't even have the advantage of Defender's advantage, right, the high ground, pulling the SCVs, then he's going to be in a lot of trouble. And I don't know if I really like how this is starting out. Yeah, GuMiho might have a good time factory, but with the amount of Reapers that ByuN could get, that might not even be enough.
Yeah, and it's a big problem too that GuMiho went into the main base and didn't actually scout out the second barracks either. He's sending an SCV to the low ground to take a command center. Oh boy, ZombiGov, this looks like it might be a bit of a disaster here as a command center. The minerals are there, but the first Reaper does arrive.
Okay, all right. Because that would have been so awkward, right? That would have been brand freaking new. So 1 Reaper might have been able to get that cancel. But yeah, it's absolutely a problem for GuMiho, who does have no offensive capabilities really, and he's realized this, of course. He's like, oh shoot, I got to get back out here. And then also might have some trouble on the defense. It looks like because he did save his first Reaper, the worst case scenario in my mind was that he sent 1 Reaper in and ByuN had 2, right? Then bops the first Reaper, chases down the reinforcing one, and then there's nothing besides the factory. Actually, with ByuN going across the map first and getting the kind of cancel, if you will, in the command center, I don't know, this is giving GuMiho some time to get some units, but he's still using his Reapers aggressively. I feel like this is a really dangerous move.
This is such a bold play from GuMiho, but I think it's absolutely paying off at least on the offensive. Can he actually make the defense happen at home? A couple of Hellions are out. No repair happening on those Hellions just yet. He's just using the SCVs to buy some time, to buy some space. One of the Hellions ends up falling. A lot of the SCVs end up falling on both sides, but it does seem like GuMiho is getting the worst end of things, even if he may eventually clean this up.
Yeah, I don't know. It's so it's such a weird, funky position, but absolutely GuMiho comes out 6 workers less, and his command center isn't that far ahead. I think that was a very bold move that GuMiho did. Yeah, 2 Hellions is a decent amount, but you are facing pretty much the best Reaper controller in the world, and even not the best can have trouble or can work against 1 or even 2 Hellions. So this continues to go well for ByuN. He's winning a lot of these micro wars. 3 Reapers with the grenades have such good crowd control that 2 Hellions doesn't outright beat that. So it's definitely a delicate dance right now for GuMiho.
It's so delicate, and he really has to be able to fend this off. The high ground is not going to be enough. He ends up losing one of the Hellions, although actually getting quite a bit of damage on the other, on ByuN's Hellion, so is able to actually deflect the attack for now. But it does go back to what you were talking about before. The command center being that much earlier on there for ByuN is going to be the big advantage, and GuMiho's this Banshee play really has to get something done.
He's going for pinwheels, man. That's so GuMiho, he's like skirting the line, right? He's not going completely bonkers like Maru in that last series. Shout out to that one. But he's skirting the line on going a little bonkers, right? Choosing, I think, the riskier decision with the units he gets and then the technology that he gets. This is a big committal into Banshees, which basically, guys, have been not exactly useless, but they are not what they once were in TVT, that's for sure. If ByuN does get a Cyclone and a Raven, but it's possible because ByuN is ByuN that he doesn't really, you know, subscribe to the standard Raven play, that surprise Banshees might actually be genius, but I don't even know if they need pinwheels to be genius, you know?
Yeah, I'm really eager to find out how things are going to shape up over here. But man, these two Reapers are actually getting so much damage done over there. I thought that maybe things are not going to go that well since Cyclone locked onto a Hellion instead of the Siege Shank there for ByuN, but he's still got a fair amount of value there. I guess one little bright side here for GuMiho is that it wasn't scouted, but now the scan comes down and he sees two Banshees.
Okay, so that's really awkward, right? Because they were clearly chilling. All right, that was not scouting them in transit, and even though GuMiho tried to react in time to make it look like, oh yeah, I have two Banshees, the magic number that would usually only have Cloak and not make any more, it was kind of a, you know, if ByuN second guessed that it was only two Banshees, then he is totally in the right to do so. Yeah, we know that, but he would also be like, that's kind of weird movement for the Banshees. Yeah, absolutely, more Banshees are going to be on the way, and they got the speed first. So I guess the idea is that even if there was a Raven, you know, you can outmaneuver them. The problem is if you just run face first into Vikings and a Cyclone, you just ran face first faster into them.
Oh, Zombie Grab, that Viking buff really paying off dividends there as well, ensuring the kill on that Banshee. A missile turret gets a shot off on this Banshee, and it gets almost nothing done. The Vikings also kind of ward it off. And now, Zombie Grab, I have to wonder, when you've lost most of your Banshees, is the Cloak even going to have that much value anymore?
I really don't think so. He still wants to do something to harass, but it's such a... It really doesn't bother Terrans, in my opinion, past that first surprise factor, right? Whether it's one Banshee without any upgrades and they're like, oh, you made a Banshee, or it's two with Cloak. Oh, you made Banshees with Cloak. I just feel like it doesn't have a lot of oomph afterwards, unlike maybe a very odd TVP, tons of ladder experience with that, or TVZ, right? But yeah, GuMiho wants the harassment, maybe the cheeky snipe on a couple of tanks if ByuN's really not paying attention and doesn't save scans, I guess. But I would prefer him just to go ahead and cancel everything.
This is a dangerous spot here for GuMiho. As you can already see, ByuN feels like there's going to be an opportunity soon for him to go for his big attack. He's knocking down those rocks, looking for opportunity. Banshees are going to spot out the double drop. A single Viking, actually funny enough, going to be enough to ward him off. I guess also unloading underneath the Banshees is a little bit tough because they do have a high amount of DPS, so you probably do lose quite a few Marines in the process. Doesn't decide to commit to that, but I mean, he's still going to have a fair number of units coming out pretty soon.
I do love GuMiho's positioning here. This one Viking plus one missile turret is kind of perfect to deal with a double drop, and ByuN's just going to get tired of it and bring his Vikings over. So now it's only the missile turret to defend. Definitely a ByuN favored game from the get-go. The Banshees are going to try and do some damage. I said they wouldn't do a whole lot past their first surprise. Let's see if I was wrong. Medivacs, yes? No? Yes. Okay.
Yeah, just making some decisions there as the Vikings landed, but we see that ByuN is demolishing that one tank on the front lines, and a couple of the SCVs are going to be enough to ward them away. The two Banshees on the other side of the map doing quite a bit of harassment over here. One of them eventually ends up falling, but I mean, hey, I have to commend GuMiho because I thought that things were going to be a lot worse with that kind of little harassment going on, but he held strong.
Yeah, that was really nice defense of the first push. And that was going to be really important for him because he's going into mech, of course, and he's going to have a very limited production output. So Yeah, that was nicely handled. The Banshees, I still say, were basically a complete failure. One Banshee got like in total 5 SCVs and maybe a Marauder and some Marines, but there was 4 Banshees and both upgrades. Okay. Drops this time around, finally successful. It's a weird one. 2 Vikings and an injured tank that gets destroyed mostly by those, I guess the tank was helping out. But it does kill 9 SCVs, so...
Yeah, the drops spread out really, really quickly between the siege tank and everything on the right-hand side, but the Marines were the things that, like you said, getting the big damage done there with a lot of those SCV kills. Eventually, that all does get cleaned up, but surely that's still going to be a pretty comfortable position. We do see, yeah, very important to finish up those armories to get those upgrades coming up soon.
Yeah, he, you know, as a mech player, you can delay them, certainly. It's the expectation that the bio player gets the faster upgrades as well as the faster expansions. Now, in this case, GuMiho did have a 30cc for a while, so that's really helped him come back into this game. It helped his SCV count certainly come back after all the early game harassment. And in context of a mech player, I think his 3rd CC timing on location really wasn't all that bad because he did such a great job defending against the initial attacks from ByuN, which would have had a lot more spice if it wasn't for some well-placed missile turrets and Vikings. But the drops will continue, and ByuN will just continue to try and pry this can open, right? Whether by force or by tactics. Either way, it still might work out in his favor, but GuMiho's kind of stabilized.
Yeah, these suicide missions in from a lot of these Terran bio units from ByuN have not been working out initially, but this one is definitely finding its mark as he finds a lot of the siege tanks. There's no bio or actually even Hellions or anything here to support GuMiho's army, so the 3rd base even forced to lift off a really awkward position, but I think the Liberators should eventually be able to push this all back.
Yeah, perhaps those little... strong word, stabilize. Okay, he's not quite stabilized yet, but he is in control, obviously, of the situation as far as he can be, which GuMiho is very good as a mech player. He's played it, well, throughout the entirety of StarCraft's history, being from the the good old days, and he's even played it when it's very non-meta, which I would still say it's basically non-meta, and can make it work against the best players. So if he makes this comeback happen, more power to him, but at this point, this is where it really gets scary, right? The 30 supply difference, ByuN fully charged up in his production, freely getting command centers on location. ByuN should have a lot of opportunities to do some damage.
Well, he's going to try and find some sort of defense over here first as GuMiho is trying to go for that little Hellion run by, but ByuN, like you said, he is still poaching around the map looking for opportunities to get damage on it. He's going to be able to snag these Hellions that were on the offensive. That's going to allow him to just allocate more units to the offense himself. He doesn't have to worry as much about defense if there's fewer of these Hellions running around the map.
Absolutely, and it's actually kind of important that GuMiho at least tries to do this run by, even if it's only with 2 Hellions, because they still have Blue Flame. It's still quite potent, just to get that SCV count down, of course, sure, but to really keep some of these units back at home. So there's just 3 less Marauders getting that concave on top of his last effort tank, the thing that's saving his life. It could make or break a defense. The GuMiho still down overall 50 supply, 30 of it army. The upgrades finish up, but the upgrades aren't really the problem. It is just the amount of units that he has to spread out against the multi-pronged attacks. 13 tanks is starting to be a very comfortable number, but you also want some static defense, and you also got to worry about ByuN's ability to transition into mass air if he figures the ground stuff isn't working out.
Yeah, absolutely. That sensor tower is also going to be paying dividends as he does see the army attacking in from the bottom right-hand side. Needs to be prepared for potential second attack from the top left eventually, but for now, it's just about using these Vikings to try and push back the medevacs, try and kill a little of the sustainability of this attack. Because literally the 4th base flying over the attack saying, no, I got this. This is fine. I'm not worried about this defense.
He's got to. He really needs his 4th base up. Oh.
So dangerous.
Yeah, some Liberator harassment also was going down, so GuMiho really is making an attempt to get some damage done. It's very little, but again, some of these units kept at home is something. We also are seeing kind of this funny conundrum right from the get-go, honestly, right from when ByuN was more bio than early Reaper harassment. The conundrum being he has so many Marauders so often that the limited air control that GuMiho has, the one Liberator and then the Vikings covering it, has actually been instrumental in some of these defenses, as well as having more free opportunities to pick off medevacs.
Yeah, and especially given how aggressive ByuN has been about specifically finding these big drops to maneuver around the map and everything, it's actually going to become a really important factor. If he ends up losing too many more of these medevacs, then he actually loses a lot of the mobility of his army, especially on a map like Ancient Cistern.
And a lot of stims that aren't getting healed up with every single marauder, so they dash in thinking they have the opportunity, and suddenly they're getting killed a bit faster than they expect. Yeah, all these things absolutely come together. I'm not saying that marauders are bad, by the way, guys. Absolutely not. Marauders are chunky. They'll tear down the tanks very, very quickly, but there is that just weird kind of conundrum that can happen that we've seen where ByuN is microing literally 4 Marines to beat a Liberator. But here we go. One of the biggest pushes so far.
Yeah, he's going to be trying to maneuver into this bottom right-hand side of the attack angle. A lot of the siege tanks are actually still getting rallied on forward, and there is simply not enough. This is the power you were talking about those Marauder Zombie Grub. They are chunky. They also deal quite a bit of damage to that mech army, and they're going to be able to dislodge this third base location. Oh, God. Siege tank on the high ground, though. It's getting so much done.
That was a good couple of blasts there from the high ground, but still overall ByuN has opened up a grand opportunity for himself because of course he has 5 bases back at home, so he knows that this is just the beginning of the end. Once you break the mech player's tank count like that, you know you're in a good position because you basically win either way. You go continue into a lot of production on the ground, break them on the low siege tank, or you do go ahead and go into that air, in which case they'd have to read you so perfectly that, you know, accusations would be had about whether they make tanks or Vikings. Like GuMiho just can't read that perfectly, can't afford to make both.
Yeah, it's going to be a big problem coming in. As I love even just a little bits and things that you see here, as I think we saw a little while ago, like Liberator sieging up on an empty base just because GuMiho has not really been able to get a whole lot of the actual harassment successfully out there. Isn't even necessarily sure what bases have been taken. Everything as ByuN has just been kind of given the opportunity to continue to be aggressive and keep GuMiho more and more at home. We've seen fewer and fewer of those little Hellion run-bys and everything else coming on out because he is just trying to use everything he's got to dislodge these kinds of setups here that ByuN has got now.
Yeah, and one thing ByuN did in this game is go for the armor upgrades purposefully first, and I do believe it was purposeful. Occasionally in ByuN's history, he's actually just straight up made mistakes, but I do think this was on purpose. I mean, he's been able to tank a lot. The medevacs did their job, I guess, as much as they could, and that allowed him to actually break that tank count, even as his army was getting, you know, overstimmed and injured. So he is looking to end the game, as I said, through the ground or through the air. 13 Vikings for ByuN now up against GuMiho's 8. GuMiho would have to have some missile turrets to complicate matters, but ByuN still has tanks, so that would not be the complete defender's advantage. Yeah, GuMiho brings it out now, brings us back now. That'd be very surprising.
Yeah, I think there was a little bit of that defender's advantage for a bit going on for GuMiho, where the Viking count was still in his favor just because on his side of the map, that's where all of his Vikings were. ByuN had not quite rallied them forward until now, but you can see that air superiority is enough to end the game, and ByuN takes the first one.
In very much ByuN fashion, aggressive from the get-go. His 2 racks opener, I definitely think was more beneficial than the single proxy that GuMiho threw out. Then he just went into directly, basically, bio, right? There wasn't that stopover on the Ravens, which I do believe GuMiho was trying to really think this one out. There is a world in which he does defend perhaps better with the Reapers, first of all. Maybe he defends with his Reapers as opposed to attacks with them. And then he has these Banshees that are a bigger surprise. You know, they don't get scanned. That's the first thing. Or they really do take better advantage of the fact that ByuN was probably likely to not go into a Raven defense, right? But then he got Pinwheels first, so the lack of Raven actually wasn't so much the issue. And then, you know, he ran face first in a Viking, so there was that. But ByuN would go directly into producing medevacs, stim, and marauders, and that maybe could be punishable by a Banshee strategy, but it just was not at all in this game.
Yeah, and that's definitely going to be a problem when you are a player that is oftentimes, you know, really good with strategic decision making and stuff, and you're taking all these risks and just none of them are really paying off. At that point, you're playing a little bit behind against a player who is known for just having really, really fast aggressive kind of play styles that are just going to be able to take advantage of those situations. It's so tough. I think sometimes if like you make those strategic decisions that don't work out quite as well against a defensive player, it's like, oh, well, maybe they're going to play a bit more defensive. You have a little bit of more time to bounce back or something, get into your mech groove. But no, it's hard against ByuN. He just sees the opening and just goes for it.
Yeah, exactly. He's not going to let you pause, because he's not going to pause. Yeah. And that was almost even a problem. You could kind of see with some of his earlier drops that GuMiho was doing a great job denying that. Had he really overcommitted, then he is losing a lot of that constant aggression. You know, he loses 2 medevacs with Marauders and Marines, and he's not rebuilding them, you know, like a Zerg player would. And he's not getting across the map either that quickly. But ByuN also did a good job making sure not to give away too many of his early game units. Because when you do go into Marauders that quickly, when you realize what your opponent's doing, you're like, oh, a mech player, of course. There is sometimes a downside to those Marauders too, which is that they are expensive. They do work off a tech lab, and they only produce 1 at a time. So, you know, the number of them can be limited in the early game, although effective. And yeah, again, ByuN just did a good job making sure he never really over-aggressed and got, you know, too many units killed in his attempt to end the game early.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think one thing that GuMiho can take a little bit of solace in, or I guess 2 things. One is that it's a best of 5, so he's still got some opportunities to play around with over here as just the first game. And also, second of all, he took, as we were talking about, 2 really big risks with his build order. There's the proxy racks and also the Banshee play. So moving into game number 2, he really does have an opportunity to set himself up a little bit better. Even if he just decides to go for a more standard opening everything, he was just kind of end up playing a bit from behind from the beginning in that game.
Absolutely. I think you nailed it. Spot on. GuMiho just doesn't have to take so many risks and might have a better game because of it. Once again, spawning on the bottom right Terran player for Shopify Rebellion. He is ByuN.
And over here in the top left-hand side of the map, we have the blue Terran player. He is GuMiho. Use that towel to wipe his hands of that game number 1 and focus in on what his plan is for game number 2, because this time I don't see an SCV making its way across the map to proxy a barracks.
Yeah, he's going to play a little bit safer. It's kind of interesting. I always think of, you know, the Tile Terran, and then at one point when he was on Cistern Gaming, they actually made towels. We're giving them away. So yeah, they picked him up at a really nice time. Went on and win GSL shortly after the pick up. Now not on them, by the way, guys, but just thinking on it, he would be the only teamless player to qualify for this event, to perhaps participate later on this year, which he's facing the guy, ByuN, who won GSL teamless. So I think it's nice. I think it's a nice little storyline history thing right now.
That is actually really poetic. I think the only other player that could be in that situation is and it's not going to be this week. It's actually going to be next week. We'll have Classic in the second stage of the bracket and everything. But I think that's still, I love the way that you put that though. It is very poetic that the man who is a one-man army, ByuN, is now the kind of guy who's on the team, is well supported by Shopify and everything, and GuMiho is out there fighting on his own, is looking for an opportunity to get those big bucks that are on the line for this event.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we already have a difference in the build orders after ByuN opened up with the 2 racks at home, so it really wasn't, again, all lane or anything like that. He goes into a 1 racks expand, a build that at one point was about 90% of TVTs. I'd say for the last 3 years is actually about 10 to 20% of TVTs. It is considered risky, I suppose, compared to what the other person could be doing, as well as maybe not as control-oriented in the beginning either, right? So with the factory expand, you not only have some defensive structures, but you also have the option of doing X, Y, Z, A, B, C, D, all the things, which Command Center naturally pushes off a little bit. But if you do defend your 1 racks Command Center perfectly, you don't take 2 to 3 SCVs worth of damage, then you are ahead by 2 to 3 SCVs. So I think the kind of conundrum that was happening was that it was almost always that the factory expand player would get just a couple of little bits of damage, and it would kind of balance out anyways. But let's see what happens here, because if GuMiho is playing with defense in mind, because ByuN is naturally an aggressive player, and then ByuN turns it on his head, you know, goes for the 1x expand, then GuMiho's not going to get anything. He's just already behind.
Yeah. I mean, we already have from GuMiho no extra like Hellions or anything being made, just immediately from the Reapers straight up to the Ravens, adding on a couple of those extra Marines and everything. So if it is going to be an attack coming out from GuMiho, it is going to be sort of in that kind of like early mid game of Terran versus Terran, when you finally get a couple of those Ravens out and can really put on that pressure. But ByuN, I mean, that does give him a fair amount of time, right, to get up his own setup and everything.
I'm actually a little confused as to how he's not ahead by 2 SEVs, considering the openers. I guess there it is. All right. Every so often. But he's looking to do damage to his opponent. He actually went into a medevac opener. So this is, you know, aggressive and in line with ByuN's nature. If GuMiho defends this perfectly, which is hard to do, you don't even know it's on the way, then he might go ahead and grab a little bit of a lead as far as technology goes. But we'll see. The medevac so far, unseen, boosting into the main base.
Yeah, a couple of the Reapers are starting to react a bit. No pull for the SCVs. There it finally is. The Widow Mine is going to just soften up those SCVs. Does not actually kill them outright, but the Marines can finish the job. 5 workers killed is definitely not too shabby. It looks like the Hellion and the Reaper and the Natural are not going to get a whole lot done, but amazingly enough, the Reaper does survive at least for a little bit.
He'll eventually get their refinery. Oh, no. He flew too close to the sun.
Misses that Wings of Liberty Reaper attack that does the extra damage versus buildings.
Oh, heck yeah. Yeah, that was good stuff. The old KD8 charge. Well, the drop was still a massive success in my opinion, considering that it did survive and it killed that many SCVs, giving ByuN a you know, more concrete 6 SCV lead. He is still going to be behind on a Raven, which is what I was alluding to when I said like a tech lead if GuMiho were to go ahead and deal with this perfectly. But if that is actually going to make or break a GuMiho offense, you know, the 1 extra interference matrix, that remains to be seen. As ByuN moves on to his 3rd CC, I do think GuMiho will be the one to try and push out and do a little bit of containing, but yeah, we're basically just waiting for that push out because no 3rd CC, continued development on those Vikings, no sim started. There it is.
All right. Well, with the big push out coming on forward, we do have a little bit of time where ByuN is going to try, I guess, to get his defenses set up and everything. He's got his siege tank set up at his natural so far. He's got some Raven energy continuing to build on up. But remember, he was sending out a lot of those little medevac drops and everything around the map. And I think he's just pulling back with one of them with a handful of Marines on the south side of the map heading into his main base now. So he may want to get those to the front lines because he's going to need them pretty soon.
Yeah, the 2 Ravens actually just met by 2 Ravens of ByuN. Maybe a little bit more energy, but it's all about the spell casting at this point. Interference matrix from ByuN taking out most of the tanks of GuMiho. SCV pull immediately as well, as he recognized maybe, you know, that he needed it, sure, but also that if he pulled the SCVs, he would dominate. And that is the key thing. Sacrifice 10 SCVs, but make sure that you dominate the fight. Your counterattack is likely to do that SCV damage that you just took.
Yeah, really, really big W there for ByuN. Now, as long as he can carry this momentum on forward, he is going to be able to do some devastating amounts of damage over to GuMiho. It's an interesting decision. He's taking the medevac to actually spread out some of those units, which I actually really liked because GuMiho is still going to have some of those power units of defensive tanks and everything, but those are not great at defending in multiple locations at once, and that is exactly what ByuN is looking to exploit.
Yeah, GuMiho going into mech again, going to be just a little bit starved for that production. He's going to be relying on a tank count that is, you know, 1 tank goes down, and that's so much of his firepower. But GuMiho does have the Viking lead, trying to push back everything that ByuN has. Lock on is going to be effective from ByuN, who kept that Cyclone alive. Usually one of the first things to die when you defend against tanks. But 7 SCVs went down. ByuN is all over this game, basically like he was last time, which is that he's not straight up winning. It's not lulled, you know, get out of the game, certainly not, but he is in control, getting the faster 3rd CC, going to start that aggressive nature, multi-pronged attacks, and then maybe GuMiho can fix what he did last game, which was barely not defend because of the opener, but then the Banshee play not working out as well. So SCV counts similar, it's just that there's no 3rd CC quite yet for GuMiho.
Yeah, he still needs to actually get that set up and landed, and Well, it's always a bit tough as the meching player to just get those defensive setups initially up. Once they're up, it's a lot easier to make those defenses happen and everything, but still need to actually get out onto the map and set up everything there. So until that point, ByuN is still going to have some opportunities to continue to harass and continue to have total map control and map dominance. You can already see that he's moving out yet again with another attack. If that's able to intercept anything that GuMiho is trying to send out or just shut down the third base, ByuN's going to be in a world of happiness.
Yeah. It's usually a world of pain, but in this case, a world of happiness.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is kind of odd movement from GuMiho. I thought what he was doing was sieging up the high ground, but then they were scanning each other, so it was kind of like there's no surprise here. Last game, what we didn't get to highlight talking about all the things that were happening was GuMiho did forward position his tanks on the kind of shared ramp on the last map, and then had his Vikings deal with some other stuff, and that did create a barrier to entry for one of ByuN's attacks, right? And he didn't have too many very early on in the game. So yeah, I'm glad to see that GuMiho wasn't doing some weird push out. That's like what I was worried about. I was like, what? That's not mech. Like, stop. But he does pull back. So I think he was just trying to track the army a little bit, maybe get a cheeky siege up that was nicely placed, and then realizing that ByuN wasn't actually even being all that aggressive. He also was kind of pulling back, keeping it safe, waiting for more reinforcements. He sieges up in a more natural mech manner.
Now GuMiho is going to see the army, talking about tracking the army with the Hellions. Now these two siege tanks on the front lines are immediately going to get interference matrix. All of the Ravens have used the energy for ByuN, but it seems like he's been able to find quite a bit of damage over there. Some auto turrets go down, but those get evaporated and eviscerated in a matter of seconds. ByuN already feels like he's making a lot of progress here.
Unfortunately, GuMiho did kind of lose track of the size of the army and the army placement. I think if he had seen that earlier on, he would have moved tanks to the center or moved his center tanks back, either way. But what happened there was that, especially with the interference matrix still available for ByuN, that shared location that GuMiho was trying to defend was under-defended. And it was still a very open opportunity for a concave for ByuN, whereas if he had been forced to go up the ramp or kind of into that third base where more tanks would have been sieged up altogether, that would have been tougher. But ByuN has once again opened up the opportunity to now, drive the game home, basically. Just don't fumble the ball at this point.
Yeah, he really does have, it looks like, this game close to locked up. He's been able to take out most of the Vikings there for GuMiho, so the air superiority is mostly gone outside of, I guess, a single Viking and a single Liberator that are going to be able to gradually pick away at siege tanks. But ByuN is on top of this base, and he is on top of this game, taking the second one in a row and putting this now at match point.
Yeah. ByuN he seems to have such a great handle on what GuMiho is doing. He's also getting, I would say, still a little bit ahead as far as the mind games go. Not drastically so much, but he did go for that 1-Rex expand. He got away with it. He also was able to be aggressive with it with the medevac drop that we know was very successful, while still getting everything needed to defend the attack, which was kind of my most worried point. But it ended up being moot. It wasn't too bad of a problem. We can see here, this was also really the determining factor of how this game went, is that GuMiho probably got overly aggressive himself, trying to break up that natural, thinking that he had an opportunity. And then also the usage of auto turrets versus interference matrix was a bit in question there in the previous battle, the first one as we watched. At this point, the game's over, right?
Yeah.
But the one on ByuN's ramp, GuMiho went for auto turrets, and I think they were quite ineffective. They're just not as good as they once were. And then ByuN went for some very well-placed interference matrix. I don't know if GuMiho interference matrixing would have drastically changed things, but his auto turrets definitely didn't look very impressive, is I guess what I'll say about that. So recovering after that as a mech player when you lose all that army is dangerous to do.
Yeah, really, really tough. I was under the impression also that with that big attack coming in on ByuN's natural, I actually thought that was going to be a bit more effective because ByuN had been committing a lot of these random marine drops and stuff to get worker damage or find little bits and pieces of damage, and he was ended up still losing a lot of those units in exchange for damage he definitely got done, but it's, economic damage and things like that. And there were still drops that were returning back home. So I was thinking like, oh, maybe there's an opportunity here. But man, like you said, just the choice of what you use the Raven energy on and everything else in that little micro really made the difference there and put this man up here in the top left-hand side of the map into a really good position that last game. Let's see if he can do it one more time to close this series out. He is Shopify Rebellion's ByuN.
In the bottom right, this is his last life for this best of 5, but he does have some lower brackets to look forward to. If he can't pull this one out, he is GuMiho.
Indeed. Okay. Not as far of a proxy as you oftentimes see there from GuMiho. just on the low ground of his main.
What is ByuN's SCV? Yeah, I was going to say, this is a 2 racks versus 1 rack scenario again.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I wanted to talk more about that last game because I do think you were also correct to point out just how much ByuN's army was missing, but I think maybe the fact that he was on siege could have been beneficial. We don't have time to deep dive into that engagement. Yeah. We need to talk about, once again, the 2 racks from ByuN versus the 1 racks of GuMiho, and I really... So this is because GuMiho's trying to get ByuN to SCV scout and then go, oh no, and you know, defend. You know, are you gonna try 1 racks expand? You're gonna think I'm 2 racksing you and you can't do it. But ByuN isn't SCV scouting. I'm not even sure he did last game, right? And worse, he's again 2 racksing versus 1 rack. So GuMiho, I mean, he's closer to home. His Reaper has very easy access to just go and be like, oh, okay, defend, and I think that would be fine. But it does really depend on where the Reapers go. Does GuMiho go aggressive again like he did in that first game? Does he decide to play it safe and keep it at home? His SCV is scouting around, thank goodness. And actually, is he really going to find it?
He's on the pathway for it for now, but he darts south instead of north. He is going to miss it, but he is pulling back with his Reaper, and I think that's a very important thing. Like you were saying, the position of where these Reapers decide to go is going to decide so much, but ByuN is geared up. He's got both of his Reapers together. He's going to be able to find and jump on top of one of these Reapers. Will he be able to get away successfully?
I mean, the fact that it got away at all is already so important to GuMiho's defense. If that died, it is actually game over. With it alive, he might be able to micro this out. So far, so good. Tucking that Reaper that's reinforcing behind the SCVs. That's nicely done. And now he's got his Hellion. It's crazy to think about that 1 Reaper was life or death. And GuMiho, well, he's alive so far, but again, the Reaper micro of ByuN's going to be shown.
Yep, Hellion already taking quite a bit of damage over there. That is the 1 unit in these armies that is not going to heal up. SCV abandons the low ground command center for now, realizing there is no way it is going to be able to survive over there. And GuMiho, I'm actually really impressed that GuMiho has been able to get his Reapers up into his main base safely, knowing that they have to go through the center of the map basically a little bit.
Right, yeah, the reinforcing Reaper that went back onto its own high ground was in danger, and that's why I was sure to point out that GuMiho microed that very quickly. GuMiho's response, his emergency response, has been A+ so far, and it does look like he's going to save his command center, which is absolutely the most important thing. With that many building units, the command center was still in trouble, but hold on, Reaper micro once again being shown. More Reapers for ByuN, but they're injured. Now suddenly less Reapers, and okay, nothing's going to go completely topsy-turvy here.
Yeah, and it's worth noting that GuMiho did manage to get SCVs starting to build that command center yet again during all of those little trades and skirmishes. He did end up losing another one of those SCVs, but don't let the health bar confuse you. It's about the progress bar. It's a nearly finished command center, and that is actually a nice little W there, especially since he has a 3rd CC on the way as well.
Yeah, he's going to try and get away with that, which I think is actually a very good move. I don't know if it's the exact same timing as the first game, but he also was able to fit a 3rd CC fairly fast there, and that helped him recover from what was more damage, more trades. Actually, in this game, what they traded was a lot of army, an army that is ultimately unimportant as we do go into 2 and 3 bases. So that's, I would say this is better for GuMiho. He should be maybe in his best situation so far, but then last game it really got screwed up when the medevac came in, so ByuN not going for medevac this time. I guess that's not possible. And then GuMiho's maybe overly aggressive attack, so ByuN still has some units that can do damage, but GuMiho, I mean, after being down 0-2, you gotta feel nice that you didn't just immediately die, right? You actually have a pretty good chance in this game.
I mean, I'd argue this is probably one of the better starts that GuMiho's had in the series so far, so I am very curious to see how this first attack is going to go for ByuN, as the Liberator is going to be the first unit out of that starport to pop on out, and we'll be able to put on a little bit of pressure here. Stim also starts up there for ByuN. I think no one's super surprised that ByuN is going to stick with that good old Bioforce.
No, ByuN should be always the one going bio. I think maybe he's done a mech build, I'm sure. But bio it is for him. GuMiho is the one that's really swapping it up. At one point, I would say that his bio was worse, but I'm talking years ago. You know, I'm talking analysis of GuMiho in 2015. He has been forced to also, of course, get as good with bio. I would say overall, and I think we talked about this earlier on, mechanics, I think, is different between the two players. GuMiho, when he won GSL, I think his mechanics were at his peak, and then they kind of got back down to, let's just throw out an 80% number for some context. You're usually not the best. So even though I really like his bio play, I think he's done some amazing engagements in all of the matchups, and he's still got that big wrinkly brain to help him, you know, with positioning and all that. I am worried that he won't be able to keep up with ByuN.
Yeah, I will say, like, I think Katowice, I was really impressed with how well mechanically GuMiho was playing, but I think it is still, when you're comparing it against someone like ByuN, who I think it's not just something that ByuN is, like, good at, it's ByuN's forte, is I think his speed, his aggression, his ability to seize those kind of opportunities and moments and stuff. It is difficult when you just go head-to-head comparison against someone that is strongest in this category, and you're kind of just saying like, oh yeah, I'm like, I've caught up to the standard level.
Yeah, and now that we've kind of touched on that, we can bring up their history. So you were right to point out that GuMiho's Katowice performance was really good. He was looking really strong. His mechanics, I had no qualms with them, basically. But historically, between these two, they don't play each other, despite both being online warriors. Somehow they managed to dodge. So they played, you know, once this year, and ByuN won that. But then before that, it was GuMiho. Before that, it was ByuN twice. They do go back and forth. And a lot of their matches are also very close, 3-2s, 1-2s. So I definitely don't want to give the impression that I think GuMiho is just bound to lose here, that ByuN is that much better. But ByuN also has the momentum. He's already up 2-0. He already was rocking it in the first two games. And that's what I'm personally including with my bias towards ByuN.
Yeah, I think that's entirely fair. Now, we do have ByuN getting set up over here, and it is going to get spotted at a small little cost there of the Reapers and Hellions, the units that are not going to have as much value as the game goes on. So I think he's probably well and fine creating a bit of that information for those units, and is going to be able to resituate himself a bit. He, very interestingly, was he just sending all of his Ravens across the map? Is he going to need those in a moment?
Well, we are kind of reaching that point where Ravens, I guess you could say, don't make or break a defense, but it is very risky. You know, absolutely. They could have died. First of all, they could die. And then second of all, yeah, auto turrets are, they're just not as effective against, well, a lot of stuff, but the marine reinforcements are so perfectly timed that the auto turrets would have been devastating if it was only a tank. But this ended up being a waste of, well, energy, which isn't too bad, but
might be able to find a single tank over here if the repair isn't good enough. Another one of the Ravens. I mean, truly all of the energy for these Ravens of GuMiho is just absolutely being utilized immediately. And finding a couple of workers over here is nice, but also losing a refinery of his own. Hasn't really felt safe establishing his third command center or anything. It does feel like I don't know. I do wonder if the Ravens would have been useful for dislodging this a little faster, but this is a very nice jump on.
Whoa, ByuN just wasn't expecting that. He just didn't think that GuMiho was ready to pounce on him. And GuMiho did that without combat shields. I was just about to point out that their upgrades had evened up after GuMiho had gotten ahead, but then GuMiho was still behind on stim and combat shields, and he jumped on ByuN. He was right to do so. His reinforcements, of course, coming out faster when he's the defender, so he eventually just had the firepower. And ByuN making, well, a mistake that certainly surpasses anything we were just talking about, you know? Yeah. Like the Raven energy is just a non-issue. GuMiho slam dunk victory right there, gonna try and turn it into a victory of this game.
Might very well be able to do so. Interference Matrix goes out on one of the very few siege tanks around. It gets picked off. Another siege tank is in that natural, but this is going to be the counter move here for ByuN. He's going to go for the counter Doom drop. The Vikings are going to be able to take care of most of these medevacs, and that is going to make things very difficult to evacuate, but is he actually going to be able to find enough damage there? He is delaying this attack in from GuMiho.
Oh no, Gumi's not even paying attention. Those Marines maybe could have taken out the tank, but there is the fight on the front lines. That's why he wasn't paying attention. The SCVs going to the slaughter. Did they even help? I'm not so sure. ByuN losing all of his SCVs, getting his tanks on siege, chased down, and he has to tap out. He just will not be able to do equivalent damage. Gee. Oof.
Wow, that game did not go how I thought it was going to go based on the first start of it. It really did seem like it was an interesting position. It felt like, oh man, GuMiho feels like he's still on the back foot there, but that single jump on that army, and I do have to compliment especially GuMiho on how the Raven harassment did kind of distract ByuN, right? The reason why he was able to get that nice little jump on there is because he was actually doing all that Raven harassment and keeping ByuN occupied. So that move right there that you saw, that was the game deciding thing. That was what turned everything on its head.
Oh, 100%. And I think overall, I agree with you. The Ravens were such a distraction. The thing is, we talk about forced errors because we really should. You know, that this game is incredibly difficult, incredibly complicated, and these guys are moving at the speed of light, equivalent to us anyways. And so, you know, it's very important to point out that they were distracted. The thing is, I have to be a little critical in that case. ByuN was basically, like, let's call it secure on his tank siege position at GuMiho's natural. And he unsieged and moved to be further aggressive. He was going up the ramp. He wasn't trying to retreat, right? If you are distracted, you're kind of like the first rule, especially for us plebs, is to just have your tank siege, you know, in some secure locations. Deal with it, get your ducks in a row mentally and be like, first I'll do this, and then I'll do this, and then I'm covered by this, so I don't have to worry about that so much. And he was the one that opened up that opportunity. So forced error to a degree, but also just a bit too, I don't know, cavalier of a play there from ByuN, perhaps too hyped up in his own momentum. GuMiho slapping it down and saying, I'm not going to go down 0-3. So I'm excited about that. I wanted to go this game 5. Let's get into Royal Blood. In the bottom left, we do have the Red Terran, ByuN.
And up in the top right-hand side of the map, the Blue Terran player who just put his first map of victory on the board. It is GuMiho. I think that's such a fair point, though, actually. You know, when you see all of those units just getting jumped on, it like didn't even register to me. It's like, wait, that means that they were not siege up. That they weren't in the position that they were before. So ByuN was clearly, you're absolutely right. He was trying to move them around and stuff, and that is a dangerous play if you are distracted and everything. So I think it's a really, really good point that you bring up there, as maybe ByuN just getting a little too caught up with his own kind of movements and everything, and maybe overestimating how many actions he had available to deal with the Raven harassment while also moving his army around.
Yeah, it's like playing like a online strategy game, right? You ran out of actions, you didn't notice it.
Yeah. I mean, it is the third resource of StarCraft, right? People always talk about that. There's minerals, there is Vespian gas, and there's actions, like available attention span.
Yep. Yeah. And also, I kind of pointed out there, he might have just been additionally very optimistic about his chances that GuMiho wouldn't pounce on him or wouldn't win the fight, because GuMiho still didn't have combat shields. But, you know, it's arguably another reason to keep those tanks sieged, because without combat shields, you do get that one shot if they stim. So even if you are saying, if you're thinking that GuMiho would have eventually broken out anyways, if ByuN had stayed sieged up in that pocket that he was in, but GuMiho was going to break it because he just had more reinforcements, right? He's on his side of the map. Yeah, but it would have been a much messier trade, 100%. So don't be giving any benefit to that, especially without those combat shields in play. GuMiho was not in a position to break siege tanks, but unsieged tanks, while their DPS is okay, they are no match for Marines. So
yeah,
just the one moment to really ruin that game for ByuN.
Yeah, interesting series so far. I mean, we've now been able to witness 3 different games from these players who've seen a surprising number of those kind of like proxy racks ideas or like build orders and stuff coming out from both these players. We've seen the really strange commitment to the hyperflight rotors from GuMiho in game number 1 and stuff. But I think all of these games have, for the most part, ended in that kind of early part of the mid game, or like maybe like the middle-ish part of the mid game. We haven't really seen either one of these players get into like the later stages where they really do get to big maxed out armies kind of colliding with each other, setting up the big sensor tower defensive placements and everything. I think there was like maybe one game we got close to it, but just a little bit shy of it. So I am curious if this is going to maybe be the game where we get to that stage, or if it's going to be yet again one of these players, most likely ByuN, getting up in his opponent's face and kind of driving the game a little bit into a shoehorned victory for one of the players a little bit earlier on.
We certainly haven't gotten anywhere close to the late game decision of 8 racks versus 3 starport. Nowhere close to that. As you said, we barely even made it to third base sensor towers. So I do think that'll be a stark contrast between the two. As far as that mid-game play, Marine Tank versus Marine Tank, they both kind of have to be active. So it would look a lot like that last game, I say. But then we might actually head into a very late game in which GuMiho would probably end up going a little bit more passive, 4 base, 5 base with Ravens and Vikings. And then ByuN has just shown repeatedly that he just prefers the 8 racks. He's constantly facing Maru, who's a master of the 3 starport and still occasionally wins versus him. The openings could have turned out aggressive, by the way, as they both went into some reactored Reapers, but some. So it wasn't 5 Reapers, 3 Hellions, just enough to probably defend if their opponent did. Oh, ByuN's going 2 starport. Okay, so GuMiho is going to be the first aggressor, but he won't find 2 Cyclones as well. Let's see if he finds some damage, and also if he scouts that second starport.
Yeah, he's going to be making his way forward. Very important to get your units a good spread over here for these initial engagements, both for the Cyclone lock-on, so the Hellion damage. First Cyclone does manage to lock on over there for GuMiho, finds a bit of damage on ByuN's Cyclone, but ByuN is the defender, so he does have the opportunity to just repair that back up. And, well, GuMiho doesn't really scout anything of the second starport. He does see the army composition, but not really what's behind the lines.
Yeah, that's potentially an issue. Now, I know this happened, yesterday, right, with Hero Marine and Spirit, and the 2 starport didn't just win the game because it was unscouted. But it is obviously better to scout than not to scout. Certain expectations in a TVT, sure, but this double starport build has certainly been added to the book of builds of almost every Terran nowadays. Ooh, some nice lock-ons. Yeah, okay. GuMiho keeping 2 Cyclones alive, so it gives him that map control, which is really nice. And then he gets the 3rd CC on location because he has the map control, so this is good play. But yeah, that double starport, he really wants to know, just so he can prep how he takes the engagement, maybe how active he is with the double Cyclone, maybe what he chooses out of his own starport, to be honest. Because the conundrum is that you don't really beat them at their own game. If you're producing starport Vikings, they're producing 1 more than you, right? But you might be able to beat them on the ground because, again, those reinforcements on the defenders comes out faster. You pull some SEVs, and the tanks still have vulnerability. They get overwhelmed. So that's what we're looking at right now, is if GuMiho can kind of track this and not let it get wedged into a particularly good location.
Yeah, even got some SCVs being pulled off the mineral line for ByuN to just help repair up a couple of these units. I have always found that also especially helpful with those Viking wars and just being able to repair and absorb a couple extra shots, or even keeping your Ravens alive a little bit longer. But here we go. The engagement is about to start. A lot of auditors thrown down for GuMiho, whereas interference matrices there for ByuN, and ByuN is going to absolutely clean house.
Yeah, unfortunately, I liked the idea of GuMiho's auto turrets because if they managed to hold on long enough so the interference matrices were gone, then that's perfect. But again, the auto turrets nowadays, not as impressive as they once were, and now it is a green light for ByuN to continue to be aggressive, more aggressive than he might have been before that fight. He knows he has the advantage, so he's going to push it. The last tank standing gets obliterated, and GuMiho might be having to tap out of the series.
Yeah, we have some Vikings flanking in from behind. It was a great idea there for GuMiho, but it is not going to be enough. And ByuN takes the series 3-1 and qualifies for the next stage.
GG's. Well played. So ByuN just showing some, well, typical trademark aggressive play. And then changing it up into something that I think if I were to say one of these guys went for a starport, double starport build, I would not have said ByuN. So that was a nice change of tactics too, kind of just surprising the typical mech player, the typical kind of off-kilter build player with a good old 2-starport. ByuN playing that series very well.
All right, we're going to hear the boys at the desk break that series down a little bit further, but back to you, James, at the Kalaris Dome.
Huh?
The Kalaris Dome, we're back. Yes, that's right. It's unbelievable. He gets himself the victory moving through into Gamers 8. We've got Roddy and Katz to talk about this one. Roddy, it was back and forth for the most part here, and both guys bringing out some different strategies here and there, but ByuN's able to eke it out.
Yeah, I think in the end we can say pretty dominating victory though by ByuN. He just felt a bit sharper, he felt a bit better across the board. In game 1 I really loved the way that the dealt with the Banshees, and ByuN is just so good. He knows how big of an investment that is, so he knows if you're spending all that money on the Banshees and the fancy upgrades, there should be an opening on your side of the map, and there was. And here in game 2 I absolutely love what ZombieGrub pointed out there. Did ByuN have to pull the SCVs in the defense? Maybe not, but by doing it he comes out of it with a 20 army supply lead, and he just gets himself in a magnificent position. So great call on calling the SCVs there in game 2.
Yeah, the highlights brought to you by Aramco here as we look towards game 3. GuMiho with a little bit of a fight back here, Cats, but in the whole series not to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, game 3 was interesting. Like ZombieGrub said, the pounce from GuMiho was really, really good, capitalizing on ByuN not paying attention. But ByuN still gave himself a shot even in this game, right? Towards the tail end with that Doom drop. It puts GuMiho in such a difficult decision because if you stop to deal with the Doom drop, which he probably could have over time, even with reinforcements, even if he rallied his barracks a little bit better, then you're not killing your opponent where you have an army advantage on the other side. So great job there by GuMiho to kind of ignore a Doom drop, a very difficult decision to make, and just cross the map. But that was, I mean, all that we saw from him, really. Like Roddy said, it was pretty dominating from ByuN.
Yep, there you go. That's the last game, and proper good killer instinct it felt from ByuN here in this game. Roddy, he just knew exactly when to go over the road and be able to take out GuMiho quite nicely.
Yeah, I felt like both of these guys are in pretty good shape, but I think maybe when they are both in shape, then ByuN is still just a slightly better player, or at least in 2023. We don't know what the future holds, and in the past, I'm sure it has been different, but I don't think that GuMiho has to be ultra upset. I don't think he played a poor series. It just felt that ByuN was a little more dialed in, and yeah, one mistake, obviously, when he lost the tanks on Gresvan, scan went down from GuMiho, so he scanned, he saw all the tanks on siege, and I think if ByuN would have just retreated towards the top side, he would have been okay. Then I don't think GuMiho can make that chase. But ByuN actually tried to retreat through the center, which bypasses the natural of GuMiho. And obviously, yeah, he got punished for that. But I just felt that it was a well-deserved victory for ByuN.
Yeah, cool stuff, cool stuff. All right, let's check in with the bracket then. Here, as now we have our second player moving through into Gamers 8. Solar and ByuN are the two to make it here in the upper bracket. I think, Katz, if you'd have given me this bracket earlier than the tournament beginning, which we did get it, I suppose, I don't think I'd have bet on these two names to be able to take those top 2 spots.
Maybe not Solar because he has Maru, but you know, like Dark Solar, Maru, I think all out of the top of the bracket had good chances, with Maru obviously being the favorite. And yeah, I agree. In the bottom, I would have said Hero or ByuN with a slight favoritism towards Hero, but ByuN isn't too big of a surprise.
Ah, there you go, there you go. Let's take a look at the lower bracket then as well, because this now confirms the fact that GuMiho is going to go up against Dark, and of course, Roddy, we have that Maru and Hero match as well to look forward to, all tomorrow, of course.
Yeah, Maru Hero, I don't want to build it up too much because sometimes you get a whole bunch of 8-9 minute games, SCV pulls, and 2 base blink stalker all-ins, but on paper, Maru Hero is an absolute banger. And GuMiho Dark, I actually think is very interesting as well. Like, I feel like if I have to predict one best of 5 to go on for a very long time, I feel like we should be locked in for an hour for that one at the bare minimum, potentially an hour and a half.
There you go. I mean, we're speed running today, so give us a bit more StarCraft. That would be fantastic. And for GuMiho, he's got the ultimate test really going on. He had to be a Protoss, play against a Terra. Now he's got a very powerful Zerg to go up against in that lower bracket. Thank you, gentlemen. Time to go to a break. When we return, we are getting the EPT bracket ramped back up here as we got 2 more best of 5s for qualification to Gamers 8.